B.J. Miller begins his talk not with statistics or medical theory, but with a deeply personal moment that would shape the course of his life forever. As a young college student at Princeton in the early 1990s, he was like many others, restless, adventurous, and full of the illusion of invincibility. One night, in the spirit of harmless mischief, he and some friends decided to climb onto the roof of a parked commuter train. What they didn't know, or didn't fully consider, was that above those trains ran an electrified wire carrying 11,000 volts of electricity. The moment Miller stood up, his metal wristwatch made contact with the live wire. A violent surge of energy exploded through his body in an instant, bright, searing, and incomprehensible. He remembers little from that moment except a blinding flash and the sensation of being thrown by a force greater than anything he could imagine. The current blasted through him, burning from the inside out. When he woke up in a hospital burn unit, he learned the reality: both of his legs had been amputated below the knee, and one arm was gone below the elbow. His body bore the marks of electricity's violent path. The months that followed were a brutal initiation into the world of medicine, not as a physician, but as a patient. The pain was relentless. His body was swollen, raw, and stitched. He endured endless medical procedures, therapies, and the impersonal rhythms of hospital life. Yet, in that vulnerable state, he began noticing something important. The healthcare system was not designed to care for people, it was designed to treat problems. Doctors and nurses often focused on fixing what was broken, but rarely paused to see the person inside the chart. That realization became the seed of his life's mission. The accident was not just a tragedy, it was a portal into understanding mortality, suffering, and the desperate human need for dignity. In losing 3 limbs, Miller gained something far less visible but far more enduring: a profound empathy for those whose lives are suddenly and irreversibly changed. This empathy would one day become the foundation of his work in palliative care, where the goal is not just to extend life, but to enrich it, even in the face of death. After surviving the accident and enduring months in the hospital, B.J. Miller began to see pain in a new light. Not all pain was the same, some felt strangely valuable, while other kinds were pure cruelty. As both a patient and, later, a physician, he realized there was a crucial distinction that almost no one in the medical system openly discussed: necessary suffering and unnecessary suffering. Necessary suffering, he explains, is the kind that comes with being human. It is the heartbreak of losing someone you love, the grief of knowing your days are numbered, the ache in your chest when you say a final goodbye. This kind of pain, while difficult, often carries meaning. It connects us to each other and can even deepen our appreciation of life. It is not something to fix or erase, because, in many ways, it is part of what makes life worth living. Unnecessary suffering, on the other hand, is the kind created by systems, bureaucracy, and thoughtlessness. It is the kind he saw everywhere in hospitals: patients made to wait for hours in cold, fluorescent-lit rooms, alarms and machines constantly beeping, depriving them of sleep, families shuffled through sterile corridors without warmth or compassion, medical routines that prioritize efficiency over empathy. This kind of suffering doesn't make anyone stronger, it only depletes. Miller recalls moments during his own recovery when a simple act of kindness could have eased his distress, but instead, the hospital's rigid protocols kept care mechanical. He also remembers the sting of being treated like a case, instead of a person, his humanity reduced to a set of injuries and procedures. These experiences stayed with him, shaping his philosophy as a palliative care physician. While we cannot eliminate necessary suffering, we have a moral duty to remove unnecessary suffering wherever possible. In his view, good end-of-life care is not about prolonging survival at all costs, it's about reducing needless burdens so patients can focus on what matters most. This might mean better lighting in a room, easier access to nature, or simply sitting in silence with a person who's afraid. It's small details like these, he says, that determine whether someone spends their last days in distress or in peace. B.J. Miller was deep into his recovery in the burn unit when this scene unfolded. His world had shrunk to a small, sterile hospital room, a place of constant buzzing machines, sharp antiseptic smells, and the relentless cycle of treatments and procedures. Outside, the seasons were changing, but inside, time felt frozen. The walls were white, the air was recycled, and the only view he had of the world was through a small, sealed window. In those weeks, life felt reduced to survival: medication schedules, dressing changes, and the dull monotony of waiting for his body to heal. One day, a nurse, Someone who understood that healing was more than medical charts and wound care, walked in carrying something unexpected, a snowball. She had gone outside during her break, scooped it up, and smuggled it past hospital rules. Without saying much, she placed it in his hand. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. The cold bit into his skin, sharp and bracing, but it wasn't unpleasant, it was real. He could feel the delicate crunch as his fingers pressed into it, the way it began to melt, leaving icy rivulets of water on his warm skin. The faint, crisp smell of winter rose up, transporting him far beyond the burn unit. In that moment, he wasn't just a patient with amputations and burns, he was a human being standing outside in the middle of a snow-covered world, breathing in the beauty of it. It was such a small thing, a clump of frozen water, but it reminded him that he was still part of the world beyond those walls. It broke through the fog of pain and monotony, reconnecting him to the planet, to his senses, and to a sense of wonder he thought he had lost. For Miller, that snowball became a lasting symbol of the power of sensory experience in care. It was a reminder that healing doesn't only come from surgeries or medication, it comes from being reminded you're alive. Even at the end of life, a single sensory moment can carry more comfort and meaning than the most advanced medical intervention. Years after his accident, B.J. Miller was working as a palliative care physician when he met Frank, a man in his late 50s whose life had already been a long, difficult journey. Frank was living with advanced cancer, and on top of that, he carried the weight of an HIV diagnosis. His body was frail, his energy often sapped by both the illness and the treatments meant to help him. By medical standards, the goal was clear: manage the pain, slow the disease's progress, keep him alive as long as possible. But when Miller sat down with Frank, he didn't start by talking about chemotherapy schedules or lab results. He started with a simple question: what matters to you now? Frank paused, and in that pause, the sterile framework of medical care cracked open. He said he didn't want to spend the rest of his days in hospital rooms or tethered to IV poles. What he wanted was a final experience that made him feel alive, something that connected him to joy, nature, and the world beyond his illness. After some thought, he revealed his wish to raft the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. It was not a reasonable request by medical standards. The logistics were daunting, the risks high. He was sick, frail, and in no shape, at least physically, to endure such a trip. But Miller knew that palliative care wasn't just about preserving the body, it was about honoring the human spirit. Together with Frank's care team, they began to plan. There were medical clearances to secure, medications to arrange, and safety measures to put in place. But the focus was on possibility, not limitation. Frank made the trip, wrapped in the sounds of rushing water, surrounded by canyon walls carved by millions of years. He laughed, he rested, and he soaked in the majesty of a place larger than his pain. For a few days, the boundaries of illness loosened, and he lived in a way that felt whole again. When he returned, Frank's disease was no less advanced, his prognosis no different, but something in him had shifted. He had claimed the time he had left, refusing to let illness dictate every detail of his final chapter. Miller saw in Frank's story the clearest proof of his philosophy, that end-of-life care isn't about extending time, it's about making the time left worth living. As B.J. Miller moved toward the heart of his message, he stepped back from individual stories and looked at the bigger picture: how we, as a society, approach the end of life. He argued that our current system treats dying as a medical failure, something to be fought until the very last moment, often at the expense of the person's comfort, dignity, and sense of self. In hospitals, death is too often an event surrounded by fluorescent lights, beeping machines, and a maze of protocols, when it could be a moment of connection, beauty, and even creativity. Miller called for a shift in thinking, a design approach to dying. Just as architects design buildings to be both functional and beautiful, and just as artists design experiences to evoke emotion, we can design the end of life to be more humane, more personal, and more meaningful. It begins, he said, with honoring the senses: the warmth of sunlight on skin, the smell of flowers in bloom, the sound of music drifting through a room. These simple sensory experiences, which most of us take for granted, can bring profound comfort and joy when time is short. He shared how, at the Zen Hospice project where he worked, small but thoughtful rituals transformed the atmosphere. When someone passed away, the staff would sprinkle flower petals on the body as it left the building, a gesture of beauty, reverence, and love. It was a way of saying, this life mattered, without words. The ritual also reminded the living that death is not just an ending, it's a part of the same continuum as birth, growth, and love. Miller emphasized that designing death is not about pretending it's easy or painless. It's about reclaiming it from the cold efficiency of institutions and giving it back to the people who are living it. It's about play and imagination, creating moments that reflect a person's values, passions, and joys, even in their final hours. That could mean eating a favorite meal, watching a last sunset, laughing with friends, or holding a snowball in your hand. He closed with a simple, yet profound reminder: we cannot solve death, but we can shape how it happens. We can make it less about machines and more about meaning, less about fear and more about connection. In his words, let death be what takes us, not a lack of imagination. If this story moved you, please share it, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more stories of love, redemption, and hope.